Well, good evening. How are you guys doing tonight? Beautiful weather today.
I'm sure you brought that back from Florida for us. I really appreciate it.
It was not my intention. Today was beautiful, but when it gets into the 70s, that's definitely shorts weather for me. So, but yeah, it is a beautiful day. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we're going to be discussing dinosaurs and dating methods and how they fit into the historicity of Genesis. But before we get into that, let me pray. Lord God Almighty, we come before you today and we give you thanks and praise for all that you do for us. Everything we have is from you. You are the giver of every good and perfect gift, and I just praise you and I thank you for it all. Father, I ask that you will send your Spirit here tonight, speak what needs to be spoken, and give us ears to hear and to understand what is presented in ways that honor and glorify you. Jesus, I pray for this in your name. Amen. Okay, so dinosaurs are just very intriguing creatures that God has created. They are just magnificent to look at when you go into a museum, just the size, the enormity of them, and they're just fascinating. There's been lots and lots of movies about dinosaurs, and it leads us to just wonder and imagine about what they are, because they are magnificent creatures. And how we see them, especially in the dating methods, how we see them depends upon our perspective. And we're going to go over what that would look like from a Christian perspective, and we're also going to look at that from a scientific perspective to see what they perceive of dinosaurs. And I think understanding someone else's perspective is important in being able to relate to them and understand where they're coming from to find some common ground so that conversations can happen. So to begin with tonight, dinosaur is a word that was invented or created in the 1800s after these skeletons had started to be found. And the word dinosaur simply means terrible lizard. And terrible in terms of the gigantic nature that they are. So when these first started to be found in the in the ground, they were just mesmerizing to the people who were finding them. And it brought certain levels of just understanding, like this is a gigantic, and they saw that they were lizard-like, and so they termed this terrible lizard. And so that's the concept of what dinosaur means. Some other interesting aspects of the dinosaur, according to Ken Ham, and he is the one who does Answers in Genesis, which is responsible for the Ark in Kentucky. He says, other than the size of some dinosaurs, the major feature that really distinguishes dinosaurs from other reptiles, such as crocodiles, is the position of their limbs. Dinosaurs had posture that was fully erect, similar to that in mammals. Most other reptiles have limbs in sprawling positions. For instance, compare the way a crocodile walks with that of, say, a cow. Dinosaurs would have moved like a cow with limbs supporting the body from beneath. Crocodiles waddle as their limbs project sideways from their bellies. So it is something that's fascinating when we would go to a zoo, when we would look at the way a crocodile, an alligator moves, even compare that to like a turtle. The dinosaurs would move much more like a mammal than they would with a reptile, as they are classified in the animal kingdom. And so, like, they just elicit a lot of intrigue. They are fascinating creatures, whether you're a young kid and you have dinosaurs that you play with, or you really like the Jurassic Park series. They are fascinating creatures. And so there are different ways for Christians to look at the world of dinosaurs and how they fit into the historicity of Genesis. So Wayne Grudem, in his book Systematic Theology, says this: those who support a young earth theory would say that dinosaurs and human beings lived on the earth at the same time, and that dinosaurs subsequently became extinct, perhaps in the flood. Young earth advocates, of course, would differ with the methods used to arrive at such ancient dates for dinosaurs. Among those who hold to an old earth view, some would want to say that dinosaurs were among the creatures that Adam named in Genesis 2:19 through 20, and that they subsequently perished, perhaps in the flood. They would admit that dinosaurs may have existed earlier than humanity, but would say that they did not become extinct until after the time of Adam and Eve. Others, who hold to an old earth perspective, would say that the sixth day of creation was millions of years long, and that dinosaurs had already become extinct by the time Adam was created and named the animals. And again, that goes back to Genesis 2:19 through 20. And so these are the perspectives that Christians have. Number one is that humans and dinosaurs were created on the same day, on the sixth day of creation, which was a literal 24-hour day, and that they lived together and thrived together. Other Christians would say there are humans and dinosaurs live together, but dinosaurs came on the scene earlier. They don't believe in a literal 24-hour day period, but that dinosaurs and humans lived together. And then the third perspective is that it was not a 24-hour day period, but the sixth day was millions of years long, and that humans and dinosaurs did not coexist together. So that is a wide range of beliefs from a Christian perspective. We are later in this time, we're going to look at why some people believe that they were millions of years old and why some people believe that they were not that old. But to start off with, we're going to look at the aspect of, could dinosaurs have been in the Bible? Is that a perspective that people have? And because if they did exist in the time of humans, they would have been notable creatures to be able to write down and to see and to just talk about. So the Bible talks about two creatures. Again, the term dinosaur was not created until the 1800s. But the Bible does use two different terms to describe magnificent beasts. One is a land animal, the other one is a sea creature. And a lot of people who hold to that humans and dinosaurs live together point to these verses to talk about how they show us dinosaurs in the Bible. So the first one is called a behemoth. And according to the NLT Bible Notes, the identification of behemoth is disputed. Some people think it is an earthly creature. Some people think it is a dinosaur. Some people think it is a hippopotamus that they are describing here. And other people think that it is a mythical monster in ancient literature used for just literary devices. But this is how the Bible describes behemoth in Job chapter 40, verses 15 to 24. God is in this time speaking to Job, and God says, "Take a look at behemoth, which I made, just as I made you. It eats grass like an ox. See its powerful loins and the muscles of its belly, Its tail is as strong as a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are knit together tightly. Its bones are tubes of bronze. Its limbs are bars of iron. It is a prime example of God's handiwork, and only its creator can threaten it. The mountains offer it their best food, where all the wild animals play. It lies under the lotus plants, hidden by the reeds in the marsh. The lotus plants give it shade among the willows beside the stream. It's not disturbed by the raging river, not concerned when the swelling Jordan rushes around it. No one can catch it off guard or put a ring in its nose and lead it away. And so it describes it in kind of huge terms here. Its tail is as strong as a cedar. Its tail is like a tree. And if you would look at a hippo's tail, it is not impressive at all. It's actually curly. It's very, very small. It would not be described as a cedar. But could that be used as a metaphor, an analogy about how strong this creature that God created was? And so there's plenty of different perspectives on this, but people who believe that dinosaurs and humans live together would point to this and say, yes, the Bible does talk about dinosaurs. This behemoth is a description of that, and we can see at least in this description where it's a very impressive creature. If its tail is as strong as a tree, like that is a massive tail. And it does, its bones are tubes of bronze, limbs are bars of iron. It's just this really strong creature. Not even a rushing river can displace it. It is that strong and is that enormous. And so that's one way that people say, yes, the Bible does describe dinosaurs. Another aspect chapter of the book of Job is Leviathan. And again, the identification of a Leviathan is disputed, ranging from an earthly creature to a mythical monster that is just meant to describe the majesty of how strong God is. So in Job chapter 41, verses 12 through 24, again, God is speaking to Job, and he describes Leviathan in this way. I want to emphasize Leviathan's limbs and its enormous strength and graceful form. Who can strip off its hide? And who can penetrate its double layer of armor? Who can pry open its jaws, for its teeth are terrible? The scales on its back are like rows of shields tightly sealed together. They are so close together that no air can get between them. Each scale sticks tight to the next. They interlock and cannot be penetrated. When it sneezes, it flashes light. Its eyes are like the red of dawn. Lightning leaps from its mouth. Flames of fire flash out. Smoke steams from its nostrils like steam from a pot heated over burning rushes. Its breath would kindle coals, for flames shoot from its mouth. The tremendous strength in Leviathan's neck strikes terror wherever it goes. Its flesh is hard and firm and cannot be penetrated. Its heart is hard as rock, hard as millstone. And again, it's describing it in these gigantic terms, these breathtaking concepts that would strike fear in the reader. This is a massive creature that, if God is in control of this, like the concept here is that it is, God is powerful, God is strong. No one else can tame this creature. But again, it uses descriptions of that we would see easily transfer to the realm of dinosaurs. And that's the concept here. The Bible here describes Leviathan as we would expect a dinosaur to be described. Now, the perspective is that we have to decide whether these are literal characteristics of these animals, whether they are exaggerations of existing animals that we would see today, or whether these are poetic descriptions of the power and the majesty of God. And that's one of the things that we individually need to wrestle with, something that we need to comprehend and understand. Are these talking about dinosaurs, or are these just describing the strength of God? Leviathan is also mentioned elsewhere in the Bible, in Psalm 74:14 and Psalm 104:26 and Isaiah 27:1. These are all descriptions. These are all mentioning this Leviathan creature again. So it's mentioned more than one time in Scripture, and so it is, again, those are also passages to look at to decide whether or not you believe this is a description of a dinosaur. So, if dinosaurs lived with humans, we potentially have here historic evidence of them being there. But if it was just in the Bible, like that wouldn't be very much clarity, because there is disputes on how to read these. But there are other descriptions in other ancient literatures that also describe what we would classify today as dinosaur-like creatures. So in Mesopotamia, which is the Near East where Israel is, there is a document called the Enuma Elish, and it features a creature called Tiamat, and this creature is described as a primordial sea beast that represents chaos. In the work also from Mesopotamia called the Epic of Gilgamesh, it includes a dragon. And again, dinosaur wasn't invented in the when these were being written, and so using the term dragon might have been how they described dinosaurs. And so there are these gigantic, enormous creatures that are found and recorded in Mesopotamia. In ancient China, we have dragons being mystified and glorified. They are regarded as controlling rain and water, representing creative power, which is part of the yin and yang creative there. And the document there was called the El Ching. Then in India, we have the mention of Virtra, which is a malevolent dragon that was controlling, again, the water, and it was a creature that was killed by a person named Indra. Then we have myths in ancient Greek and Roman culture, which feature serpent monsters or dracones. The dragon that's guarding the golden fleece in the Argonautica, and the beast that was defeated by Perseus to save Andromeda. These are two examples of large beasts that needed to be destroyed. And again, are they using the concept of mythology to try to describe what their deities or demigods were doing back in the day? Or are they using real examples of animals that they have to that they are describing to help them to understand how strong and powerful their deities, their demigods are? Also in Beowulf and the Nibelung Enlid, they depict fire-breathing, treasure-hoarding monsters, which are often called Wyrm. In multiple locations around the world, we have these depictions of huge animals that we would kind of relate to as dinosaurs, and they are describing them and the terror that comes from them. And they are setting them up as creatures that if somebody defeats, it's showing how powerful that person is. So, we have descriptions in the Bible, potentially of Behemoth and Leviathan as potential dinosaurs. We have other historical instances here. Now, when we read through these are more than likely going to be considered fiction literature. So we have to, again, decide, are these being descriptive of animals that are really present on this world? But outside of the writings, there are also depictions, pictures that we have found of these supposed, what we could classify as dinosaurs. So, Answers in Genesis, again, that's from Ken Ham, and he is the one who's overseeing the Ark in Kentucky. What he says is that dragons are memorialized in legends, historical accounts, and artwork from around the world. To name a few, there's an Aboriginal depiction of a water monster that resembles a plesiosaur, an ancient historical account of serpents in Egypt with bat-like wings, the epic poem of Beowulf with its account of a fiery flying serpent, Native American petroglyphs, etchings in stone, that resemble dragons. Dragons are depicted on flags, emblems, tapestries, maps, pottery, pictographs, and more, and these are the documents that we have. Although from disconnected cultures, the descriptions are remarkably similar. And the idea there is not all of these had communication with one another. And while they are not communicating, while they're disconnected in that way, the descriptions are similar. We can see similar patterns, which would either be a huge coincidence with the concept of we're going to describe this creature in this way, another culture at another time is going to describe it in this way, and the similarities are, like we talked about last time with the Noah's flood, the similarities can help us see, historically speaking, that they knew of these creatures. They were real creatures there. And then he ends this quote by saying, perhaps because dragons were real. And in this case, he means dragons as dinosaurs, these terrible lizards that were across the planet. So, there's the historical evidence that we have. We have biblical evidence that could possibly point to human beings knowing about these dinosaurs. And so what does the evidence show? What do we have in front of us that helps us to make the conclusion as to whether or not did human beings live with dinosaurs? Because we know dinosaurs exist because of the skeletons that we have found, and we know human beings exist because we're here. But just did we live together? Were we on this planet together? And so first we're going to take a look at the scientific perspective. And to understand this, we're going to need to understand how science dates these fossils. And it's really a three-pronged approach from what I've researched. There's a fourth dating method that I'm not going to get into, but the three main ways that they date these fossils are, number one, with radioactive atoms and their decay. They take a look at them and try to get the age of that rock layer, and when they find the age of the rock layer because of these radioactive atoms, they can date that layer of rock. The second way that they do this is that they look at the rock layers themselves, and they're like, okay, this one dated to this era, and so we're going to go down 2 more layers, then that's where we find these bones, and so we need to be able to date them like that. And so the rock layers themselves, they go in a pattern, and scientifically speaking, the higher layer can't be older than the younger, or the bottom layer. And that's the process they use to do it. And then they've looked across the world for these skeletons, these remains of these animals, and they compare the dates with what they have found elsewhere in these rock layers, and they use all that data to come up with a dating method. So this first quote here is from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it's going to describe the process used to identify the elements that they can date with the radioactive elements. So they say radiometric dating is based on the phenomenon of radioactivity. Atoms of radioactive elements, such as uranium, have so much energy that their cores or nuclei are literally flying apart, shedding motes of their matter in a process called decay. Through our observations and understanding of physics, we know that each radioactive element decays at its own steady rate. As they shed particles, the atoms change into atoms of other elements, their progeny, until they finally become stable. Uranium, for instance, goes through a long decay chain that eventually ends with lead. Through observations and understanding of chemistry, scientists know that lead and uranium-containing minerals form with certain proportions of each element. As the uranium decays, the ratios of the element will change. By combining our knowledge of chemistry and physics, we can use the rate at which uranium atoms decay and observations of the ratios of the element today to figure out how old the minerals are. All right, so that is a load. So when we find lead on this planet that is near uranium atoms, we can surmise, or scientifically speaking, they surmise that there was a lot of uranium there, and it's transformed now into lead. And the concept is that looking at that and seeing how much uranium is left and how much lead has been there, they're able to see, all right, they're able to, I'm going to use the word surmise again. They're able to surmise, all right, all of this was uranium, and then it got changed into lead. And because we know what proportion of this is lead and what proportion of this is uranium, we can date this because uranium decays at a very constant rate. So that's the process here. They are looking at these radioactive elements, and through observation and their understanding of chemistry and physics, they are able, in their opinion, to determine how old that rock is. And notice that I said rock there, because the actual bones that they are finding, the actual skeletons, do not contain any uranium at all. They have none in them. And so they look at the rock layer and they see a skeleton there, they see the remains, and they're going to look in that rock layer for lead and uranium deposits. And wherever they find that, they're going to be like, okay, now I can date this, because they have found it in the same rock layer. And that's the way that they find out, that's the way that they test how old these are. So, the National Institute goes on to say, geologists use the radiometric dating of uranium and the isotopes of other radioactive elements, combined with observations of fossils and sediment layers, to chart the course of Earth's natural history and the evolution of life. So they are looking at this rock layer, they are seeing, okay, most of the time uranium happens in volcanic rock. That's where they find it, and that's where it gets transferred into lead. So they're looking at this layer, and however close the latest volcanic rock is in that layer is how they determine the age of this. That's the process that they use. And so they look at, they observe the fossils, they observe the sediment layers, and they find, they put all of this information together to give us a date. So, also in an article, Tracy Wilson talks more about this. So she says, unfortunately, these elements, and earlier in the article she mentioned uranium-238, uranium-235, and potassium-40, don't exist in dinosaur fossils themselves. Each of them typically exists in igneous rock or rock made from cooled magma. Fossils, however, form in sedimentary rock. Sediment quickly covers a dinosaur's body, and the sediment and bones gradually turn into rock. But this sediment doesn't typically include the necessary isotopes in measurable amounts. Fossils can't form in the igneous rock that usually does contain the isotopes. The extreme temperatures of the magma would just destroy the bones. So to determine the age of sedimentary rock layers, researchers first have to find neighboring layers of Earth. That includes igneous rock, such as volcanic ash. These layers are like bookends. They give a beginning and an end to the period of time when the sedimentary rock formed. By using radiometric dating to determine the age of igneous brackets, researchers can accurately determine the age of the sedimentary layers between them. So they're saying there are some times when obviously volcanoes don't erupt all the time. And so their guess as to what happens, their hypothesis, is that if we can find igneous rock, this rock from cooled magma, below this sediment layer that has these dinosaur bones in it, and above it, we can have this range of date to determine, all right, we know this much uranium, we know this much lead is there. We can see how much it's decayed over time and how much of it has transferred into lead. And that will lead them into saying, all right, it's between this age and this many years ago and that many years ago. And then when they come across more fossils in that same rock layer, they're able to say, all right, these fossils are that old as well, between this age range. And so this is what scientists are doing to determine the age of the Earth. The one thing I have not mentioned that I do want to bring up is the idea that these radioactive isotopes have a much longer rate of decay than non-radioactive elements. So for instance, we would have carbon in our bones. And carbon, they can tell how much, they call it a half-life when it reduces by half. We know what carbon reduces in. And carbon, unfortunately, though, has a very small half-life. 5,700 years compared to these radioactive isotopes, which they say are millions and millions of years. So we can't do the rocks, the sediment layer. We cannot do the rocks that are there based on these long-term radioactive isotopes because it's just, we can't date all of them because the carbon has just disappeared. So, this is the process for which they do it. And as they have looked at these layers of rocks in the earth, the fossils, they say, are all in alignment with what the scientists would call evolution. So you go to the bottom layer, these are the oldest elements that are there, and when, again, they test this cooled magma, this igneous rock, they are looking at, this is how old, this is the range that it is in between. And so this is the process by which they determine the age of these fossils. So, Richard Dawkins, who wrote The God Delusion, says this: all the fossils that we have ever found have always been found in the appropriate place in the time sequence. There are no fossils in the wrong place. And so what he means by that is this layer of rock contains the right animals to believe in the evolutionary process. Then we go up and we see more complex animals in this. And while they have never found an amphibian that starts as a frog and then is morphing and changing into some other animal, they've never found any pieces of the changes, the incremental changes that they say would happen in evolution. He's saying the fossils that we have always been found in the right places. It goes along with our theory. And so this is what scientists believe. And Wayne Grudem, he is a Christian, and this is from Systematic Theology. He says that current scientific opinion holds that dinosaurs became extinct about 65 million years ago, millions of years before human beings appeared on the earth. So scientifically speaking, humans and dinosaurs did not coexist together. So that is a scientific view of it. We're now going to look at a Bible-centric version of this. And again, I want to touch on the point that Wayne Grudem shared, that there are multiple degrees of what Christians believe. Do Christians believe that a young earth and dinosaurs and humans live together? Christians believe that it's older than a young earth, I'll call it a middle-aged earth, and that humans and dinosaurs did live together. And then we have people who are Christians and believe that the dinosaurs and humans did not coexist together. But I am looking at this from a complete picture of a biblical version of what this would look like. So one possible explanation for all of this, and I mentioned it briefly last time, is from Kent Hovind. He has a website called drdino.com, and he says this. If you read the Bible, it says that people lived to be 900 years old before the flood came. Go to Genesis 5. Reptiles never stop growing. Lizards, snakes, turtles never stop. What would happen if a lizard could live to be 900 years old? He'd be really big. Dinosaurs were big lizards who lived with Adam and Eve. And so this is his perception of it. And he has a whole design about how the earth, when it says the waters were separated below from the waters above, he believes that there was an ice layer above the earth, suspended by the earth's magnetic field, and it kind of made it like a greenhouse in this earth where there was abundant life everywhere, and everything would have had all of the food it needed to grow as big as the dinosaurs grew. He's got a lot of theories on this, but the biblical-centric worldview he certainly holds is that the idea of humans and dinosaurs living together. This is one possible example of that. And he would point to the idea of Romans chapter 5, verse 12, which proclaims that there was no death before sin entered the world. And this, according to him, points to a young earth. And what Romans 5:12 says is, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. And the idea here is that he believes that this doesn't just mean human beings. Sin entered the world for human beings. He means this is death didn't enter the world for any of the animal kingdom. Obviously, if you read Genesis, human beings and animals are eating plants, and so I guess you could call that some sort of death when you pick up a plant and eat it. But this is the idea that in the animal kingdom, no death came, according to this view. Then in an article, Misha Hewlett writes and shows both different perspectives of the Christian, whether they lived with humans or not. He says, dinosaurs could have lived then, before sin entered the world. Fossil evidence suggests many were plant eaters, which fits with the Bible's picture of a death-free creation before the fall, from Genesis 1:29 to 30. Sharp teeth, sharp claws, spikes, armor plates may have various other purposes, or may have been used for eating meat after the fall. After sin, death entered the world, and all creation was affected. And the concept here is that the things that we see on dinosaurs, the plates that they believe were on some of the plant-eating dinosaurs to protect them, and those sorts of things, those could have had different purposes other than protecting themselves from attacks from a Tyrannosaurus rex or something like that. These sharp claws, these sharp teeth could have been used for something else prior to the fall. And really, when you look at a fossil, most of the time, all you can surmise from that in a very logical way is that there was something that was alive there and now it's dead. We are just guessing as to what these dinosaurs really look like outside of their bone structure. We can obviously see that. But outside of that, like how big their brains were is something we can tell by the size of the skulls that we have. But what they ate and that sort of thing, those are all guesses as of right now. And so he's saying, like, biblically speaking, yes, dinosaurs could have lived with humans on this world. Another example, and this one is from science, is that to believe that dinosaurs and humans lived together, to again promote the idea of a biblical-centered world, a view of dinosaurs, is that animal proteins like collagen and DNA have been found in multiple different ancient species. So such as in Montana, they've found these elements in a T-Rex, in a Triceratops, and a duck-bill dinosaur. They've found these things in dinosaur eggs from Argentina, in an embryonic sauropod from southern China, in a Psittacosaurus bones from China's Gobi Desert, in an Archaeopteryx from Germany, in a Seismosaur from New Mexico, in a Mosasaurus from Kansas and Belgium. They are finding dinosaur bones with these proteins. And this is highly significant because, especially for collagen and DNA, we know that they degrade over time. And they have tested this in a lab, and collagen degrades within like 800,000 years, and DNA degrades within, I think it was 960,000 years. And so not even getting to 1 million years, all of these should be decayed. All of these should be gone. But we are seeing these in some of the remains that we have. So, Brian Thomas, in an article for Answers in Genesis, wrote, "So we see that 2 fossil observations confirm biblical creation. Biomaterials have a shelf life significantly shorter than 1 million years, and certain fossils from around the world still contain original biomaterials." So again, this is pointing back to the collagen and the DNA that have been found in those sources. And the concept here is clearly that how did these biomaterials, how did these proteins continue to survive if dinosaurs ceased to exist 65 million years ago? And this is one of the things that a creation scientist would point to. Then we have the concept of, in at least secular culture, the idea of there was an age of dinosaurs. But the fossil records is disputing that. So I'm going to first go down to this Carl Werner quote. And he says this: "Paleontologists have found 432 mammal species in the dinosaur layers, almost as many as the number of dinosaur species. These include nearly 100 complete mammal skeletons. So along with the dinosaurs, there were mammals living, and this is changing what the scientists have thought of in the geologic record. First was this age of the dinosaurs, and then came the mammals later in evolutionary thought. This is being contrasted, and even there's an article that I don't have quoted here that talked about a animal skeleton that they have found that resembles very closely to a modern duck. And this was found in the dinosaur level. And they did not think that birds, like ducks, really the modern bird did not come on the scene until much later after the dinosaur age. And so there are discoveries all the time that are really causing pause in the geologic record and how we can perceive that. Lastly, to end with today, Dr. Z.G. Liu says, in a sense, the age of dinosaurs is a misnomer. Mammals are just one such important group that lived with dinosaurs, coexisted with dinosaurs, and survived the dinosaurs. And again, that's a concept that gives us pause to say, all right, there were dinosaurs and that was it in that age. When you look at popular movies about dinosaurs, you don't really see little mice or other mammals that are around, but they were around according to the fossil record. These mammals have existed, did exist, and did thrive, and did outlive these dinosaurs. Okay. So, what questions did it bring up? What comments do you have? Where do you need more clarity? Anything like that?
Did they find human skeletons along the same level as dinosaurs?
Not to my knowledge, not what I have seen in researching for this. And they would say, the Answers in Genesis people and the young earth creationists would say that's because of the nature of the flood. The heavier bones would sink first and be cemented. That's how they would process through that. That's how they would describe that.
But duck.
Right, yeah. There are going to be, it's not 100% foolproof, but their idea is that the heavier material would sink to the bottom first. And maybe that was one that just got caught under a boulder from a mountain or something that had torn apart. But that, to my understanding, that's how they would describe that. They would describe it as the heavier materials are going to be with their like heavy material in a general form. Okay, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, not until after, when sin entered the world, that's when they started eating meat. So, but yeah.
One of the questions that I have is, how does that relate to when Adam and Eve were alive?
Okay.
Were Adam and Eve alive when dinosaurs were on the earth?
There are, I would say, two groups of Christians who believe they were. And like looking at this evidence, I think, and again, I'm biased in this in my worldview, but I think this is, I would call it convincing evidence that I would think that, yes, the humans and dinosaurs lived together. But there are Christians who would disagree with that. There are Christians that I respect that disagree with that.
It's okay for them to be wrong.
Okay.
And they think that it was from the test they did, a giant sloth that was walking and a person's footprints were basically almost in the same path.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know where that was. I've seen it a couple different times on PBS.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
They talk about the cave there that was gigantic. And, no, never mind. I'm getting two things mixed up. I was thinking if the cave bear lived to be 900 and it kept growing, that may,
Mm-hmm.
that may be why it got so big.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. What? So that I don't do this wrong, like, are there any things that you would like more research on regarding this? I know that this is from what I've heard, this is the topic people wanted to hear. But, like, what other questions can I research and maybe we go over next time that you may have on this?
This seems like a pretty broad amount of thought and comparison. I'm impressed with all the different things that can be found about this.
Okay.
It's hard to wrap your mind around it.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Sounded interesting. They said that lizards never stop growing.
Mm-hmm.
And after Adam and Eve were created, nowhere does it say the length of time that it was before they sinned.
Right.
So I suppose those lizards could have grown for, if man lived 900 years after that, why not 900 years
Yeah,
or more? I mean,
absolutely.
I guess I would classify myself more as maybe not a young Earth, but a younger,
Yeah.
somewhere in between young and old.
Mid-age.
And then I read some books about eternity and the new Earth and stuff.
Okay.
And I feel like, to me, I'm trying to put God in a box in my timetable.
Okay.
And I can't understand living forever in a new earth.
Yeah.
I believe that's what's going to happen.
Right.
And so I guess I don't have the problem believing that maybe those dinosaurs were around for several hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
If I said a million years, that'd probably be a stretch for mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have a hard time, like, God can do anything. And the amazing thing about his creation here is that we're not going to know everything because our brains just can't fathom all of it. But what we can fathom is that God is magnificent and he is absolutely creative in all that he made and all that he did. And we just have to trust that whatever he chooses to reveal to us, he will. We have what we need to know him and to make him known. And that's our goal and objective.
What do you think that one should teach children about dinosaurs for real? And my granddaughters were born in Indy, but they were talking about dinosaurs at the time frame, and I don't know how to, how would you put it into a child's perspective?
Yeah.
Even my own.
Are you just referring to the times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you just, educate young about that?
That's a great question.
Full of questions, and they
Yes.
know.
Oh, yeah.
I know they're teaching that down there.
Yeah.
Agree or not agree.
Right. Yeah. And since Christians have a wide view of whether or not dinosaurs lived with humans, yeah, they could be teaching anything on the spectrum. But what I would say is that dinosaurs, especially when you're dealing with elementary students, dinosaurs showcase God's creativity. They reflect on how majestic and big he is, and that he's just amazing in his creation. That's probably what I would focus on for elementary age students. When they get older, like, I would just have a conversation with them and say, hey, what do you think about this? Research the human footprint in the dinosaur level, or some of the other things that we said, like these animal proteins that scientifically speaking, they can't last more than 1 million years. And so how could dinosaurs be dead for 65 million years? I would just look at the evidence from a Christian perspective and say, this is what science is saying, and what do you think about that, and how does this fit in with your worldview? Because to me, whether or not humans lived with dinosaurs is not a salvation issue. It's not about, if you have the wrong belief in this, you're not going to spend eternity with God. But the inquisitive mind does want to know. And this, and evidence like this, would point to that. So that's kind of how I would pursue it. Because I'm just thinking about my kids at that age, and none of them were ready for a conversation about how scientists are dating these things, and that sort of thing, and how it's dependent upon the rock layer that it's in, it's dependent upon the volcanic ash that's above and below it, and how those elements are decaying. And I also have questions about the rate of decay, like how can they know what it's going to decay, like if it's buried under other mounds of dirt. It doesn't make sense to me that they can just, this is what happens in a lab, and so this is what happens 100 feet under the ground. Yeah. Let me think about that a little bit more, but that's where I would go. That's where I would go right now, is when they're in elementary age, just be in awe and say, God created this. It is majestic. It is awesome. What does that tell you about God?
God created the animals first and then Adam and Eve, right?
Yes, human was the last.
So I think the dating standards are hokey. And if he created the animals first, he could have created all the dinosaurs and all the mammals and all the fish and everything else before he ever created Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they could all have existed before Adam and Eve did. And it's totally possible that when that meteor did hit that made the Gulf of Mexico, pardon me, the Gulf of America. And the meteor hit that, and it blasted the world and killed all the dinosaurs, because that's one of the big theories.
Mhm.
We've got rock strata that show that, whatever, all that happened. So all that could have happened before Adam and Eve came along, and then God created Adam and Eve. Were they Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal?
That is a question I'll have to answer next week.
Okay. I kind of figured. But the Neanderthals existed, if you accept the hokey dating mechanisms, which
Mhm.
I have problems with. Oh, please. If you accept that, they listed for tens of thousands of years. And the Neanderthals were very prolific.
Mhm.
For a long time. And then Cro-Magnon showed up in and they existed together for a while, apparently. And then the Neanderthals sort of kind of faded out, and the Cro-Magnons kind of took over, and that's where we come from, although some of us have some Neanderthal characteristics. Well, it's true. We have
Yes.
some Neanderthal genetic structure. Some
Right.
of us, not all of us, but some of us. Some of us act like it too. So that's where I start getting confused, because it's like, okay, well, according to our archaeology, there's all these different hominids, humanoids, whatever,
Mhm.
that appear kind of at the same time. We kind of all generally look like 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, mouth, whatever.
Yeah.
Different functional levels, different cultural levels, different behaviors, that kind of stuff. Where do Adam and Eve fit into that?
Okay. Yeah.
About teaching or bringing dinosaurs. ChristianBook.com, they have home schooling, and they have many books about dinosaurs, etc., from a Christian perspective. So that's one research, or one source that you may have.
Answers in Genesis would have books too, from a young Earth perspective about dinosaurs.
So, do you think have they found dinosaur bone fossils? Well, if they did coexist, I think we a lot more stuff in the Bible about it.
Okay. That's fair.
Job got stomped by a Tyrannosaurus.
Right.
There's been some talk about that. Some kind of.
Right.
So with that, I was thinking, a couple weeks ago, we talked about everybody being in that kind of area. So could the dinosaurs have been
Oh, elsewhere. Okay.
spread out a long ways away from where the humans were?
Sure. We don't, no. Like, even, I'm thinking of like a saber-toothed tiger. From what I know, those were relegated to the colder areas. And so would humans have even come in contact with them at that time? That's a very fair and valid question.
Because if we, it's always portrayed that dinosaurs were so vicious,
Mm-hmm.
saber-toothed tigers and all those things were so vicious. Well, how could they have existed beside man? That men would get all eaten up.
Right.
How could they? But so that theory kind of makes sense that yes, they were created first, but in a different part.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because I guess I'm just wrestling with, from the fossils that we have that are really, that's really proof that dinosaurs did exist.
Yeah.
What kind of creatures were they? They surely would not have been docile, and unless before sin entered the world, maybe they didn't eat people.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, what we can know from a skeleton is just very limited. We can make guesses, but that's all that it is. Like even when you see dinosaurs on the big screen, those are just guesses as to what that fully looked like. And yeah, we don't know.
And then maybe God decided, hey, they've lived their usefulness, I don't want dinosaurs to live anymore, so,
Hmm.
so then the meteor happened, I don't know.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your guys' patience, and I thank you for your input. Um,
Thank you for all your research, it's a lot.
yeah.
Question.
Yeah, go for it.
We were talking about these dinosaurs. Some of them were meat eaters.
Hmm.
Did they eat, they didn't eat meat before sin?
Correct.
What you're saying?
That is what the Bible says. Yeah. There was, man, I think it's,
Well, those verses in Job,
So,
talked about the plant eating, whatever that thing was.
yeah, the behemoth, yeah.
so how many dinosaurs would have been running around after sin entered the story? With men's legs hanging out of their mouth? I feel like maybe Hollywood has spun things way
Sure.
out of proportion to make money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And my next thing is, when Jesus comes back and God makes everything right again, it seems like I've seen a picture or something about everything will be living in harmony.
Okay. Yeah.
The tigers will be
Yes.
laying down with little children, and there's no violence of any sort in that
Right.
respect.
Yeah. That's in Isaiah that he talks about that.
And it's just the more questions we ask, the more unsure we are.
Right. I would agree with that. Yes. But Genesis 1:29 says, "Then God said, 'Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth, and all the fruit trees for your food. And I have given every green plant as food for all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life.' And that is what happened." And so it doesn't really happen until the flood and Moses or Noah getting off of the ark that God says, "All right, now you have the animals, and now you're able to eat them." And so if you do look at it from that perspective, like it would be, the dinosaurs would have had to have been existent after the flood, because we believe that like the T-Rex and the raptors and those were carnivorous. They were meat eaters. And so I would say that looking at it from that perspective, it would be that. But there are some people who take this and say that it was a stipulation that death was in the world, in the animal kingdom, prior to sin. Going to that, the Romans 5 passage. And it was only humans that death entered the world. So there could have been lots of generations of animals that had died before, but they were not carnivorous, scripturally speaking, until after the flood.
Didn't God say to Noah that he was going to make the animals afraid of man?
Yes.
So up until that time, it's likely that the animals were not afraid of man, that man and animals were friends.
Correct. Yeah. I'm trying to find that. I don't know why it's going off and on like that. There you go. It's in Genesis 9. I have given them to you for food, just as I have given you grain and vegetables. Here. I can't see it right here real quick. But yes, that is what is declared in, and I'm pretty sure it's Genesis 9. So there would have been, like, that is when it seems from this perspective that that would be where the brokenness, I don't know what that is. Okay, we'll just unplug that. That would seem that's where the, like, bears started mauling humans and that sort of thing. So.
9:2.
Oh, okay.
The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea.
Thank you. So Genesis 9:2. Okay, anything else?
Real quick.
Yeah.
How about in Genesis where it talks about supernatural beings like aliens?
Okay.
You know, in Genesis 6 talks about extraterrestrial.
So that was my plan for next week. So,
Well, you said things that might be of interest.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. But when we discuss, like, the Nephilim, that would be in that category too. So that will be next week. Great question, though. Okay. Thank you, guys. Again, let me end with prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you today and we thank you for the curiosity that you give to each and every one of us. We thank you for your creativity, and we thank you that you give us the ability to really just process through all these things. And I pray, Father, that our hearts are being drawn closer to you and that we are just more and more in awe of your creativity. Jesus, I pray for your blessing to be upon everyone who hears this, and I pray that you will be with them and draw them closer and closer to you. I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you, guys.